Okay, there we go. Alrighty. Hello out there in video land. We're going to continue with the Circe chapter today. I will place a clue in the video description. So if you want to read along with our reading, you certainly can. And with that, off we go. Here we are, the wreaths. Sweet of the sweets, sweets of sin. Bloom, my spine's a bit limp. Go return. And this food? Eat it or get all pig sticky. Absurd I am. Waste of money. 1 and 8 pence too much. The retriever drives a cold, sniveling muzzle against his hand, wagging his tail. Strange how they take to me. Even that brute today. Better speak to him first. Like women, they like rencontre. Stinks like a polecat. Chacun son goût. He might be mad. Fido. Uncertain in his movements. Good fellow. Gary Owen. The wolf dog sprawls on his back, wiggling obscenely with begging paws, his long black tongue lolling out. Influence of his surroundings. Give and have done with him. Provided nobody, calling encouraging words, he shambles back with a furtive poacher's tread, dogged by the setter into a dark, stale stunk corner. He unrolls one parcel and goes to the dump, the crewbean softly, but holds back and feels the trotter. Sizable for 3 pence, but then I have it in my left hand. Calls for more effort. Why? Smaller from want of use. Oh, let it slide. 2 and 6. With regret, he lets unrolled crewbean and trotter slide. The mastiff mauls the bundle clumsily and gluts himself with growling greed, crunching the bones. 2 rain-capped watch approach, silent, vigilant. They murmur together. Next, please.
The watch, bloom of bloom, for bloom, bloom. Each lays hand on Bloom's shoulder. First watch, caught in the act, commit no nuisance. Bloom stammers, I doing good to others. A covey of gulls, storm petrels, rises hungrily from liffey slime with Banbury cakes in their beaks. The gulls, caw, caw, cake-free cake. Bloom, the friend of man trained by kindness. He points. Bob Doran, toppling from a high bar stool, sways over the munching spaniel. Bob Doran, Towser, give us the paw, give us the paw. The bulldog growls, his scruff standing, a gobbet of pig's knuckle between his molars, through which rabid scum spittle dribbles. Bob Doran falls silently into an area. Second watch, prevention of cruelty to animals. Bloom enthusiastically, a noble work. I scolded that tram driver on Harold's Cross Bridge for eluding the poor horse with his harness scab. Bad French I got for my pains. Of course it was Frosty and the last tram. All tales of circus life are highly demoralizing. Next, please.
Senior Maffei, passion pale, in lion tamer's costume, with diamond studs in his shirt front, steps forward, holding a circus paper hoop, a curling carriage whip, and a revolver, with which he covers the gorging boarhound. Senior Maffei, with a sinister smile. Ladies and gentlemen, my educated greyhound. It was I who broke in the booking bronco Ajax with my patent spiked saddle for carnivores. Lash under the belly with a knotted thong. Block, tackle, and a strangling pulley will bring your lion to heel, no matter how fractious. Even Leo Ferox there, the Libyan manager. A red-hot crowbar and some liniment rubbing on the burning part produced Fritz of Amsterdam, the thinking hyena. He glares. I possess the Indian sign. The glint of my eye does it with these breast sparklers. With a bewitching smile, I now introduce Mademoiselle Ruby, the pride of the ring. First watch. Come, name and address. Bloom, I have forgotten at the moment. Ah, yes. He takes off his high-grade hat, saluting Dr. Bloom, Leopold, dental surgeon. You've heard of von Bloom Pasha? Umpteen millions. Donaveta owns half Austria, Egypt. Cousin. First watch. Proof. A card falls from inside the leather headband of Bloom's hat. Bloom, in red fez, Caddy's dress, coat with broad green sash, wearing a false badge of Legion of Honor, picks up the card and hastily and offers it. Allow me. My club is the Junior Army and Navy. Solicitors, Messrs. John Henry Menton, 27 Bachelor's Walk. First watch reads, Henry Flower. No fixed abode. Unlawfully watching and besetting. Second watch, an alibi. You are cautioned. Katrina.
Bloom, excuse me, produces from his heart pocket a crumpled yellow flower. This is the flower in question. It was given me by a man, I don't know his name, plausibly. You know that old joke, Rosa Castile? Bloom, the change of name, Virag. He murmurs privately and confidentially. We are engaged, you see, Sir Sergeant. Lady in the case, love and entanglement. He shoulders the second watch gently. Dash it all, it's the way we gallants have in the Navy. Uniform that does it. He turns gravely to the first watch. Still, of course, you do get your Waterloo sometimes. Drop in some evening and have a glass of old Burgundy. To the second watch gaily, I'll introduce you, Inspector. She's game. Do it at the shake of a lamb's tail. A dark mercurialized face appears, leading a veiled figure. The dark Mercury. The castle is looking for him. He was drummed out of the army. Martha, thick-veiled, a crimson halter around her neck, copy of the Irish Times in her hand, in a tone of reproach, pointing, Henry, Leopold, Lionel, thou lost one, clear my name. First watch, sternly, come to the station. Bloom, scared, hats himself, steps back, then plucking at his heart and lifting his right forearm on the square, he gives a sign and do guard a fellow craft. No, worshipful master, light of love, mistaken identity, the lion's male, the Cirque du Bosque. You remember the child's fratricide case? We medical men, by striking him dead with a hatchet. I am wrongfully accused. Better one guilty escaped than 99 wrongfully condemned. Martha, sobbing behind her veil, breach of promise. My real name is Peggy Griffin. He wrote to me that he was miserable. I'll tell my brother, the rugger fullback on you, heartless flirt. Bloom, behind his hand. She's drunk. The woman is inebriated. He murmurs vaguely the passive Ephraim Shitbreleith. Second watch, tears in his eyes to Bloom. You ought to be thoroughly well ashamed of yourself. Bloom, gentlemen of the jury, let me explain. A pure mare's nest. I'm a man misunderstood. I am being made a scapegoat of. I am a respectable married man without a stain on my character. I live in Eccles Street. My wife, I am the daughter of a most distinguished commander, a gallant, upstanding gentleman. What do you call him? Major General Brian Tweedy, one of Britain's fighting men who helped to win our battles, got his majority for the heroic defense of Rorke's Drift. Next, please.
First watch, regiment. Bloom turns to the gallery. The Royal Dublins, boys the salt of the earth, known the world over. I think I see some old comrades in arms up there among you. The RDF, with our own Metropolitan Police, guardians of our homes, the pluckiest lads and the finest body of men as physique in the service of our sovereign. A voice. Turncoat, up the Boers, who booed Joe Chamberlain? Bloom, his hand on the shoulder of the first watch. My old dad too was a JP. I'm as staunch a Britisher as you, sir, are, sir. I fought with the colours for king and country in the absent-minded war under General Gough in the park and was disabled at Spion Cop and Bloemfontein, was mentioned in dispatches. I did all a white man could. With quiet feeling, Jim Bloodsell, hold her nozzle again the bank. First watch, profession or trade? Bloom, well, I follow a literary occupation, author, journalist. In fact, we are just bringing out a collection of prize stories of which I am the inventor, something that is an entirely new departure. I am connected with the British and Irish press. If you ring up, Miles Crawford strides out jerkily, a quill between his teeth. His scarlet beak blazes with the aureole of his straw hat. He dangles a hank of Spanish onions in one hand and holds with the other hand a telephone receiver nozzle to his ear. Next, please.
Miles Crawford, his cock's wattles wagging. Hello? 7784. Hello? Freeman's Urinal and Weekly Arse Wiper here. Paralyze Europe. You which? Blue bags? Who writes? Is it Bloom? Mr. Philip Beaufoy, pale-faced, stands in the witness box in accurate morning dress, out-breast pocket with peak of handkerchief showing, creased lavender trousers and patent boots. He carries a large portfolio labelled Matcham's Masterstrokes. Beaufoy draws. No, you aren't, not by a long shot, if I know it. I don't see it, that's all. No born gentleman. No one with the most rudimentary promptings of a gentleman would stoop to such particularly loathsome conduct. One of those, my lord, a plagiarist, a soapy sneak masquerading as literature. It's perfectly obvious that with the most inherent baseness, he has cribbed some of my best-selling books, really gorgeous stuff, a perfect gem, the love passages in which are beneath suspicion. The Beaufoy books of love and great possessions, with which your lordship is doubtless familiar, are a household word throughout the kingdom. Bloom murmurs with hangdog meekness. That bit about the laughing which hand in hand I take exception to, if I may. Beaufoy, his lips upcurled, smiles superciliously on the court. You funny ass, you. You're too beastly awful weird for words. I don't think you need over-excessively disincommodate yourself in that regard. My literary agent, Mr. J.B. Pinker, is in attendance. I presume, my lord, we shall receive the usual witnesses' fees, shan't we? We are considerably out of pocket over this bally pressman Johnny, this jackdaw of Reims, who has not even been to a university. Bloom indistinctly. University of Life, bad art. Beaufoy shouts. It's a damnably foul lie showing the moral rottenness of the man. He extends his portfolio. We have here damning evidence, the corpus delicti, my lord, a specimen of my maturer work, disfigured by the hallmark of the beast. A voice from the gallery. Moses, Moses, king of the Jews, wiped his arse in the Daily News. Bloom bravely. Overdrawn. Next piece.
Oh, for you low cad. You ought to be ducked in the hush pond, you rotter, to the court. Why, look at the man's private life, leading a quadruple existence, street angel and house devil, not fit to be mentioned in mixed society, the arch conspirator of the age. Bloom to the court. And he, a bachelor, how? First watch. The king versus Bloom. Call the woman Driscoll. The crier. Mary Driscoll, scullery maid. Mary Driscoll, a slipshod servant girl, approaches. She has a bucket on the crook of her arm and a scouring brush in her hand. Second wash. Another, are you of the unfortunate class? Mary Driscoll, indignantly. I'm not a bad one. I bear a respectable character and was 4 months in my last place. I was in a situation, £6 a year, and my chances with Fridays out. And I had to leave owing to his carryings on. First watch. What do you tax him with? Mary Driscoll. He made certain suggestion, but I thought more of myself, as poor as I am. Bloom. In a house jacket of ripple cloth, flannel trousers, heelless slippers, unshaven, his hair rumpled softly. I treated you white. I gave you mementos, smart emerald garters far above your station. Incautiously, I took your part when you were accused of pilfering. There's a medium in all things. Play cricket. Mary Driscoll excitedly. As God is looking down on me tonight, if I ever laid a hand to them oysters. First watch. The offence complained of? Did something happen? Mary Driscoll. He surprised me in the near of the premises. Your Honour, when the missus was out shopping one morning with a request for a safety pin, he held me and I was discoloured in 4 places as a result. And he interfered twixt with my clothing. Bloom. She counter-assaulted. Next.
Annie Driscoll, scornfully. I had more respect for the scouring brush, so I had. I remonstrated with him, your lord, and he remarked, keep it quiet. General laughter. Georges Fautrell, clerk of the Crown and Peace, resonantly. Order in the court. The accused will now make a bogus statement. Bloom, pleading not guilty and holding a full-blown water lily, begins a long, unintelligible speech. They would hear what counsel had to say in his stirring address to the grand jury. He was down and out, but though branded as a black sheep, if he might say so, he meant to reform, to retrieve the memory of the past in a purely sisterly way, and return to nature as a purely domestic animal. A 7 months child, he had been carefully brought up and nurtured by an aged bedridden parent. There might have been lapses of an erring father, but he wanted to turn over a new leaf, and now, when at long last in sight of the whipping post, to lead a homely life in the evening of his days, permeated by the affectionate surroundings of the heaving bosom of the family. An acclimatized Britisher, he had seen that summer evening from the footplate of an engine cab of the Loop Line Railroad Company, while the rain refrained from falling glimpses, as it were, through the windows of the loveful households in Dublin City and urban district, of scenes truly rural of happiness, of the better land with Dockwell's wallpaper at 1 and 9 pence a dozen. Innocent British-born bairns lisping prayers to the sacred infant. Youthful scholars grappling with their pensiums. Model young ladies playing in the pinafore, or anon with all the fervor, reciting the family rosary round the crackling Yule log, while in the boreenes and green lanes the colleens with their swains strolled, what times the strains of organ-toned, melodeon, Britannia, meadow-bound with the 4 acting stops and 12-fold bellows, a sacrifice, greatest bargain ever. Renewed laughter. He mumbles incoherently. Reporters complain that they cannot hear. Next, please.
Longhand and shorthand without looking up from their notebooks. Loosen his boots. Professor McHugh from the press table coughs and calls. Cough it up, man. Get it out in bits. The cross-examination proceeds. Read Bloom in the bucket. A large bucket, Bloom himself, bowel trouble in Beaver Street. Bright, yes, quite bad. A plasterer's bucket by walking stiff-legged. Suffered untold misery, deadly agony. About noon, love or burgundy. Yes, some spinach. Crucial moment, he did not look in the bucket. Nobody. Rather a mess. Not completely. A Titbits back number. Uproar and cat calls. Bloom in a torn frock coat stained with whitewash. Dinged silk hat sideways on his head. A strip of sticking plaster across his nose. Talks inaudibly. J.J. O'Malloy, in barrister's gray wig and stuff gown, speaking with a voice of pained protest. This is no place for indecent levity at the expense of an erring mortal disguised in liquor. We are not in a bear garden, nor at an Oxford rag, nor is this a travesty of justice. My client is an infant, a poor foreign immigrant who started scratch as a stowaway and is now trying to turn an honest penny. The trumped up misdemeanor was due to a moment aberration of heredity brought on by hallucination, such familiarities as the alleged guilty occurrence being quite permitted in my client's native place, the land of the Pharaoh. Prima facie, I put it to you that there was no attempt at carnally knowing. Intimacy did not occur, and the offense complained of by Driscoll, that her virtue was solicited, was not repeated. I would deal in a special with atavism. There have been cases of shipwreck and somnambulism in my client's family. If the accused could speak, he could a tale unfold, one of the strangest that have ever been narrated between the covers of a book. He himself, my lord, is a physical wreck from cobbler's weak chest. His submission is that he is of Mongolian extraction and irresponsible for his actions. Not all there, in fact. Bloom, barefoot, pigeon-breasted, in Lascar's vest and trousers, apologetic toes turned in, opens his tiny mole's eyes and looks about him dazedly, passing a slow hand across his forehead. Then he hitches his belt sailor fashion and with a shrug of oriental obeisance salutes the court, pointing one thumb heavenward. Imeki veli machi, fine night, he begins to lilt simply. Lily, poor little child, lingy pigfoot, every night, pay 2 shilling, he is howled down. Next, please.
J.J. O'Malloy, hotly to the populace. This is a lone hand fight. By Hades, I will not have any client of mine gagged and badgered in this fashion by a pack of curs and laughing hyenas. The Mosaic Code has superseded the law of the jungle. I say it, and I say it emphatically without wishing for one moment to defeat the ends of justice. Accused was not accessory before the act, and prosecutrix had not been tampered with. The young person was treated by the defendant as if she were his very own daughter. Bloom takes J.J. O'Malloy's hand and raises it to his lips. I shall call rebutting evidence to prove up to the hilt that the hidden hand is again at its old game. When in doubt, persecute Bloom. My client, an innately bashful man, would be the last man in the world to do anything ungentlemanly, which injured modesty could object to, or cast a stone at a girl who took the wrong turning with some dastard responsible for her condition, had worked his own sweet will in her. He wants to go straight. I regard him as the whitest man I know. He is down on his luck at present, owing to the mortgaging of his extensive property at Agandath-na-Time in faraway Asia Minor, slides of which will now be shown. To Bloom, I suggest that you will do the handsome thing. Bloom, a penny in the pound. The mirage of the lake of Kinnereth, with blurred cattle cropping in silver haze, is projected on the wall. Moses Douglas, ferret-eyed albino in blue dungarees, stands up in the gallery, holding in each hand an orange citron and a pork kidney. Douglas, hoarsely, Bleibtreustrasse, Berlin, W13. J.J. O'Malloy, steps onto a low plinth, and holds the lapel of his coat with solemnity. His face lengthens, grows pale and bearded, with sunken eyes, the blotches of phthisis and hectic cheekbones of John F. Taylor. He applies his handkerchief to his mouth and scrutinizes the galloping tide of rose-pink blood. J.J. O'Malloy, almost voicelessly, "Excuse me, I am suffering from a severe chill. Have recently come from a sick bed. A few well-chosen words." He assumes the avine head, foxy moustache, and proboscical eloquence of Seymour Bush. When the angel's book comes to be opened, if aught that the pensive bosom has inaugurated are souls transfigured and of souls transfiguring deserves to live, I say, accord the prisoner at the bar the sacred benefit of doubt. A paper with something written on it is handed into court. Bloom, in court dress, can give best references. Messrs. Callan, Coleman, Mr. Wisdom Healy, JP, my old chief, Joe Cuff, Mr. V.B. Dillon, ex-Lord Mayor of Dublin. I have moved in the charmed circle of the highest Queens of Dublin society, carelessly. I was just chatting this afternoon at the Viceregal Lodge to my old pals, Sir Robert and Lady Ball, Astronomer Royal at the levee. Sir Bob, I said. Katrina.
Mrs. Yelverton Barry, in low corsaged opal ball dress and elbow-length ivory gloves, wearing a sable-trimmed brick-quilted dolman, a comb of brilliance and panache of osprey in her hair. "Arrest him, constable. He wrote me an anonymous letter in pretense backhand when my husband was in the north riding of the Tipperary on the Munster circuit, signed James Lovebitch. He said that he had seen from the gods my peerless globes as I sat in a box of the Theatre Royal at a command performance of La Cigale. I deeply inflamed him," he said. "He made improper overtures to me to misconduct myself at 4:30 p.m. on the following Thursday, Dunsink time. He offered to send me through the post a work of fiction by Monsieur Paul de Kock entitled The Girl with the Three Pairs of Stays." Mrs. Bellingham, in cap and seal coney mantle, wrapped up to the nose, steps out of her brougham and scans through tortoiseshell quizzing glasses, which she takes from inside her huge opossum muff. "Also to me. Yes, I believe it is the same objectionable person, because he closed my carriage door outside Sir Thornley Stoker's one sleety day during the cold snap of February '93, when even the grid of the wastepaper and the ball stop of my bath cistern were frozen. Subsequently, he enclosed a bloom of Edelweiss, called on the heights, as he said, in my honor. I had it examined by a botanical expert and elicited the information that it was a blossom of the homegrown potato plant, purloined from the forcing case of the model farm." Mrs. Yelverton Barry, "Shame on him." A crowd of sluts and ragamuffins surges forward. The sluts and ragamuffins screaming, "Stop thief! Hurrah there, Bluebeard! 3 cheers for Ikey Moe!" Second watch produces handcuffs. "Here are the Darbys." Mrs. Bellingham, "He addressed me in several handwritings with fulsome compliments as a Venus in furs and alleged profound pity for my frostbound coachman Palmer, while in the same breath he expressed himself as envious of his ear flaps and fleecy sheepskins and of his fortunate proximity to my person when standing behind my chair wearing my livery and the armorial bearings of the Bellingham escutcheon, garnished sable, a buck's head couped on. He lauded almost extravagantly my nether extremities, my swelling calves and silk hose drawn up to the limit, and eulogized glowingly my other hidden treasures and priceless lace, which, he said, he could conjure up He urged me, stating that he felt it his mission in life to urge me to defile the marriage bed, to commit adultery at the earliest possible opportunity. Next, please.
The Honourable Mrs. Mervyn Talboys, in Amazon costume, hard hat, jackboots cockspurred, vermilion waistcoat, fawn musketeer gauntlets with braided drums, long train held up, and hunting crop with which she strikes her welt constantly. Also me, because he saw me on the polo ground of the Phoenix Park at the match All Ireland versus the rest of Ireland. My eyes, I know, shone divinely as I watched Captain Slogger Dennehy of the Inniskillings win the final chucker on his darling cob Centaur. This plebeian Don Juan observed me from behind a hackney car and sent me in double envelopes an obscene photograph, such as are sold after dark on Paris boulevards, insulting to any lady. I have it still. It represents a partially nude senorita, frail and lovely. His wife, as he solemnly assured me, taken by him from nature, practicing illicit intercourse with a muscular torero, evidently a blackguard. He urged me to do likewise, to misbehave, to sin with officers of the garrison. He implored me to soil his letter in an unspeakable manner, to chastise him as he richly deserves, to bestride and ride him, to give him a most vicious horsewhipping. Mrs. Bellingham, me too. Mrs. Elverton Barry, me too. Several highly respectable Dublin ladies hold up improper letters received from Bloom. The Honourable Mrs. Mervyn Talboys stamps her jingling spurs in a sudden paroxysm of sudden fury. I will, by the God above me, I'll scourge the pigeon-livered cur as long as I can stand over him. I'll flay him alive. Next, please.
Bloom, his eyes closing, quails expectantly. Here, he squirms. Again, he pants, cringing. I love the danger. The Honourable Mrs. Mervyn Talboys, very much so. I'll make it hot for you. I'll make you dance Jack Latin for that. Mrs. Bellingham, tan his breech well, the upstart. Write the stars and stripes on it. Mrs. Yelverton Barry, disgraceful. There's no excuse for him. A married man. Bloom, all these people. I meant only the spanking idea. A warm, tingling glow without effusion, refined birching to stimulate the circulation. The Honourable Mrs. Mervyn Talboys laughs derisively. Oh, did you, my fine fellow? Well, by the living God, you'll get the surprise of your life now, believe me. The most unmerciful hiding, ever bargained for. You have lashed the dormant tigress in my nature into fury. Mrs. Bellingham shakes her muff and quizzing glances vindictively. Make him smart, Hannah dear, give him ginger. Trash the mongrel within an inch of his life. The cat o' nine tails. Geld him, vivisect him. Bloom, shuddering, shrinking, joins his hands with hanging mien. O cold, O shivery, it was your ambrosial beauty. Forget, forgive, kismet. Let me off this once, he offers the other cheek. Mrs. Yelverton Barry severely, don't do so on my account. Mrs. Talboys, he should be soundly trounced. The Honourable Mrs. Mervyn Talboys, unbuttoning her gauntlet violently. I'll do no such thing. Pig dog, and always was ever since he was pupped, to dare address me. I'll flog him black and blue in the public streets. I'll dig my spurs in him up to the rowel. He is a well-known cuckold. She swishes her hunting crop savagely in the air. Take down his trousers without loss of time. Come here, sir, quick. Ready? Bloom, trembling, beginning to obey. The weather has been so warm. Davy Stevens, ringleted, passes with a bevy of barefoot newsboys. Davy Stevens, messenger of the Sacred Heart, and Evening Telegraph with St. Patrick's Day supplement containing the new addresses of all the cuckolds in Dublin. The Very Reverend Canon O'Hanlon, in cloth of gold cope, elevates and exposes a marble timepiece. Before him, Father Conroy and the Reverend John Hughes, S.J., bend low. Timepiece unportably. Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. Next, please.
The brass quartz of a bed are heard to jangle. The quartz, jig jag, jig jagga, jig jag. A pall of fog rolls back rapidly, revealing rapidly in the jury box the faces of Martin Cunningham, foreman, silk-hatted, Jack Parr, Simon Dedalus, Tom Kiernan, Ned Lambert, John Henry Menton, Miles Crawford, Lenihan, Paddy Leonard, Nosey Flynn, McCoy, and the featureless face of a nameless one. The nameless one. Bareback riding, wait for age. Gob, he organized her. The jurors, all the heads turned to his voice. Really? The nameless one snarls. Arse over tip. 100 shillings to 5. The jurors, all their heads lowered in assent. Most of us thought as much. First watch. He's a marked man. Another girl's plat cut. Wanted, Jack the Ripper. £1,000 reward. Second watch. Awed whispers. And in black, a Mormon. Anarchist. The crier, loudly. Whereas Leopold Bloom of no fixed abode is a well-known dinotard, forger, bigamist, bawd and cuckold, and public nuisance to the citizens of Dublin. And whereas this common commission of assizes the most honourable. His Honour, Sir Frederick Faulkner, Recorder of Dublin, in judicial garb of grey stone, rises from the bench, stone-bearded. He bears in his arms an umbrella's sceptre. From his forehead arise starkly the mosaic ram's horn. The Recorder. I'll put an end to this white slave traffic and rid Dublin of this odious pest. Scandalous. He dons a black cap. Let him be taken, Mr. Sub-Sheriff, from the dock where he now stands and detained in the custody of Mountjoy Prison during His Majesty's pleasure, and there be hanged by the neck until he was dead, and therein fail not in your peril, or may the Lord have mercy on his soul, remove him. A black skull cap descends upon his head. The sub-sheriff, Long John Fanning, appears, smoking a pungent Henry Clay. Long John Fanning scowls and calls with rich, rolling utterance. Who'll hang Judas Iscariot? H. Rumbold, master barber, in a blood-coloured jerkin and a tanner's apron. A rope coiled over his shoulder mounts the block. A life preserver and a nail-studded bludgeon stuck in his belt. He rubs grimly with his grappling hands, knobbed with knuckle dusters. Next.
Rumbold. To the Recorder with sinister familiarity. Hanging Harry, Your Majesty, the mercy terror. 5 guineas a juggler, neck or nothing. The bells of George's church tolled slowly, loud, dark iron. The bells, hi-ho, hi-ho. Bloom, desperately, wait, stop. Gulls, good heart, I saw. Innocents, girl in the monkey house, Zulu chimpanzees. Pelvic Pelvic base and her artless blush unmanned me. Overcome with emotion, I left the precincts. He turns to a figure in the crowd, appealing. Heinz, may I speak to you? You know me. That 3 shillings you can keep if you want a little more. Heinz, coldly. You are a perfect stranger. Second watch, points to the corner. The bomb is here. First watch, infernal machine with a time fuse. Bloom. No, pig's feet. I was at a funeral. First watch, draws his truncheon. Liar. The beagle lifts his snout, showing the gray scorbutic face of Paddy Dignam. He has gnawed all. He exhales a putrid, carcass-fed breath. He grows in human size and shape. His dachshund coat becomes a brown mortuary habit. His green eyes flash bloodshot. Half of one ear, all the nose and both thumbs are ghoul eaters, eaten. Paddy Digman, in a hollow voice, it is true. It was my funeral. Dr. Finnecane pronounced life extinct when I succumbed to the disease from natural causes. He lifts his mutilated ashen face moonwards and bays lugubriously. Bloom in triumph. You hear? Paddy Digman. Bloom, I am Paddy Digman's spirit. List, oh list. Bloom. The voice is the voice of Esau. Next.
Second watch blesses himself. How is that possible? First watch. It is not in the Penny Catechism. Paddy Dignam. By metempsychosis, spooks. A voice. Oh, rocks. Paddy Dignam earnestly. Once I was in the employ of Mr. J.H. Menton, solicitor, commissioner for oaths and affidavits of 27 Bachelor's Walk. Now I am defunct. The wall of the heart hypertrophied. Hard lines. The poor wife was awfully cut up. How is she bearing it? Keep her off that bottle of sherry. He looks round him. A lamp. I must satisfy an animal need. That buttermilk didn't agree with me. The portly figure of John O'Connell, caretaker, stands forth, holding a bunch of keys tied with crape. Beside him stands Father Coffey, chaplain, toad-bellied, wry-necked in a surplice and bandana nightcap, holding sleepily a staff of twisted poppies. Father Coffey yawns and chants with a hoarse croak, Domine Jacobs vobiscits, Amen. John O'Connell foghorns stormily through his megaphone. Dignam Patrick T. deceased. Paddy Dignam with pricked up ears winces. Overtones. He wriggles forward, places an ear to the ground. My master's voice. John O'Connell. Burial docket letter number UP 85,000, Field 17, House of Keys, plot 101. Paddy Dignam listens with visible effort, thinking, his tail stiff-pointed, his ears cocked. Paddy Dignam. Pray for the response of his soul, the repose of his soul. He worms down through a coal hole, his brown habit trailing its tether over rattling pebbles. After him toddles an obese grandfather rat on fungus turtle paws, under gray carapace. Dignam's voice, muffled, is heard baying underground. Dignam's dead and gone below. Tom Rockford, robin red-breasted in cap and breeches, jumps from his two-columned machine. Next, please.
Tom Rochford, a hand to his breastbone, bows. Reuben J. A florin, I find him. He fixes the manhole with a resolute stare. My turn now on. Follow me up to Carlo. He executes a daredevil salmon leap in the air and is engulfed in the coal hole. 2 discs on the columns wobble eyes of naught. All recedes. Bloom plunges forward again. He stands before a lighted house listening. The kisses, winging from their bowers, fly about him, twittering, warbling, cooing. The kisses, warbling, Leo, twittering, licky, 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 sticky for Leo, cooing, Coo, 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 coo. Yum, 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 wum, wum. Warbling. Big, big. Pirouette, Leopold. Twittering. Leo, Leo. Warbling. Oh, Leo. They rustle, flutter upon his garments, a light, bright, giddy flecks, silvery sequins. Bloom, a man's touch. Sad music, church music, perhaps here. Zoe Higgins, a young whore in a sapphire slip, closed with 3 bronze buckles, a slim black velvet fillet round her throat, nods, trips down the steps, and accosts him. Zoe, are you looking for someone? He's inside with his friend. Bloom, is this Mrs. Max? Zoe, no, 81, Mrs. Cohen's. You might go further and fare worse. Mother Slipper Slapper, familiarly. She's on the job herself tonight with the vet. Her tipster that gives her all the winners and pays for her son in Oxford. Working overtime, but her looks turned today, suspiciously. You're not his father, are you? No, not I. Zoe, you're both in black. Has little Mousy any tickles tonight? His skin, alert, feels her fingertips approach. A hand slides over his left thigh. Zoe, how's the nuts? Bloom, offside. Curiously, they are on the right. How heavier, I suppose. 1 in a million, my tailor, Messius, says. Zoe, in sudden alarm, you've a hard canker. Bloom, not likely. Zoe, I feel it. Her hand slides into his left trouser pocket and brings out a hard, black, shriveled potato. She regards it and Bloom with dumb, moist lips. Katrina.
Bloom, a talisman, heirloom. Zoe, for keeps, for being so nice, eh? She puts the potato greedily into a pocket and then links his arm, cuddling him with supple warmth. He smiles uneasily. Slowly, note by note, oriental music is played. He gazes in the tawny crystal of her eyes, ringed with kohl. His smile softens. Zoe, you'll know me the next time. Bloom, forlornly, I never loved a dear gazelle, but it was sure to. Gazelles are leaping, feeding on the mountains near our lakes. Round their shores file shadows black of cedar groves. Aroma rises, a strong hair growth of resin. It burns the oriented sky of sapphire, cleft by a bronze flight of eagles. Under it lies a woman city, nude, white, still, cool, in luxury. A fountain murmurs among the damask roses. Mammoth roses murmur of scarlet wine grapes. A wine of shame, lust, blood exudes, strangely murmuring. Zoe, murmuring sing-song with the music, her odorless lips lusciously smeared with salve of swine fat and rosewater. Skorach ani wenawach benoith Yerushalayim. Bloom, fascinated. I thought you were of good stock by your accent. Zoe, and you know what thought did? She bites his ear gently with little gold stop teeth, sending on him a cloying breath of stale garlic. The roses draw apart, disclose a sepulchre of gold of kings and their moldering bones. Bloom draws back, mechanically caressing her right boob with a flat, awkward hand. Are you a Dublin girl? Zoe catches a stray hair deftly and twists it to her coil. No bloody fear. I'm English. Have you a swaggeroo? Next, please.
Bloom, as before. Rarely smoked dear. Cigar now and then. Childish device. Lewdly. The mouth can be better engaged than with the cylinder of rank weed. Zoe, go on. Make stump speech out of it. Bloom, in workman's corduroy overalls, black gantry with red floating tie and a patchy cap. Mankind is incorrigible. Sir Walter Raleigh brought from the New World that potato and that weed, the one a killer of pestilence by absorption, the other a poisoner of the ear. Eye, heart, memory, will, understanding, all. That is to say, he brought the poison 100 years before any other person whose name I forget brought the food. Suicide, lies, all our habits. Why look at our public life? Midnight chimes from distant steeples. The chimes. Turn again, Leopold, Lord Mayor of Dublin. Bloom in alderman's gown and chain. Electors of Arran Quay, Inns Quay, Rotunda, Mountjoy, and North Dock. Better run a tram line, I say, from the cattle market to the river. That's the music of the future. That's my programme. Cui bono, but our buccaneering Vanderdeckens in their phantom ship of finance. Next, please.
An elector, 3 times 3 for our future chief magistrate. The aurora borealis of the torchlight procession leads. The torchbearers. Hooray! Several well-known burgesses, city magnates, and freemen of the city shake hands with Bloom and congratulate him. Timothy Harrington, late thrice Lord Mayor of Dublin, imposing in mayoral scarlet, gold chain, and white silk tie, confers with Councillor Lorcan Sherlock, locum tenens. They nod vigorously in agreement. Late Lord Mayor Harrington, in scarlet robe with mace, gold mayoral chain, and large white silk scarf. That alderman, sir, Leo Bloom's speech be printed at the expense of the ratepayers. That the house in which he was born be ornamented with a commemorative tablet, and that the thoroughfare, hither known as Cow Parlour off Cork Street, be henceforth designated Boulevard Bloom. Councillor Lorcan Sherlock carried unanimously, Bloom impassionately. These Flying Dutchmen are lying Dutchmen as they recline in their upholstered poop, casting dice. What reck they? Machines is their cry, their chimera, their panacea, labour-saving apparatuses, supplanters, bugbears, manufactured monsters for mutual murder, hideous hobgoblins produced by a horde of capitalistic lusts upon our prostituted labour. The poor man starves while they are grassing their royal mountain stags or shooting peasants and partridges in their purblind pomp of pelf and power. But their reign is rover forever and ever and ev. Prolonged applause. Venetian masts, maypoles, and festal arches spring up. A streamer bearing the legends Céad Míle Fáilte and Matab Melech Israel spans the street. All the windows are thronged with sightseers, chiefly ladies. Along the route, the regiments of the Royal Dublin Fusiliers, the King's Own Scottish Borderers, the Cameron Highlanders, and the Welsh Fusiliers, standing to attention, keep back the crowd. Boys from high school are perched on the lampposts, telegraph poles, windowsills, cornices, gutters, chimney posts, railings, rain spouts, whistling and cheering. The pillar of the cloud appears. A fife and drum band is heard in the distance, playing the Kol Nidre. The beaters approach with imperial eagles hoisted, trailing banners and waving oriental palms. The chrysolite papal standard rises high, surrounded by pennants of the civic flag. The van of the procession appears, headed by John Howard Parnell, City Marshal, in a chessboard tabard, the Athlone Poursuivant, and the Ulster King of Arms. They are followed by the Right Honourable Joseph Hutchinson, Lord Mayor of Dublin, the Lord Mayor of Cork, their worships, the mayors of Limerick, Galway, Sligo, and Waterford, 28 Irish representative peers. Sirdars, grandees, and maharajas bearing the cloth of the state, the Dublin Metropolitan Fire Brigade, the chapter of saints of finance in their plutocratic order of precedence, the Bishop of Down and Connor, His Eminence Michael Cardinal Logue, Archbishop of Armagh, Primate of all Ireland, His Grace the Most Reverend Dr. William Alexander, Archbishop of Armagh, Primate of all Ireland, the Chief Rabbi, the Presbyterian Moderator, the heads of the Baptist, Anabaptist, Methodist, and Moravian chapels, and the Honorary Secretary of the Society of Friends. After the march, the guilds and trades and train bands with flying colours. Next, please.
Coopers, bird fanciers, millwrights, newspaper canvases, law scriveners, masseurs, vintners, truss makers, chimney sweeps, lard refiners, tabinet and poplin weavers, farriers, Italian warehousemen, church decorators, bootjack manufacturers, undertakers, silk mercers, lapidaries, salesmasters, cork cutters, assessors of fire losses, dryers and cleaners, export bottlers, fellmongers, ticket writers, heraldic seal engravers, horse repository hands, bullion brokers, cricket and archery outfitters, riddle makers, egg and potato factors, hosiers and glovers, plumbing contractors. After them marched gentlemen of the bedchamber, Black Rod, Deputy Garter, Goldstick, the Master of the Horse, the Lord Great Chamberlain, the Earl Marshal, the High Constable carrying the Sword of State, St. Stephen's Iron Crown, the Chalice and Bible, 4 buglers on foot blow a senate, beef feeders reply, winding clarions of welcome. Under an arch of triumph, Bloom appears, bareheaded, in crimson velvet mantle, trimmed with ermine, bearing St. Edward's staff, the orb and sceptre with the dove and curtana. He is seated on a milk white horse with a long flowing crimson tail, richly caparsoned with golden headstall. Wild excitement. Ladies from their balconies throw down rose petals. The air is perfumed with essences. The men cheer. Bloom's boys run amid the bystanders with branches of hawthorn and wren bushes. Bloom's boys, the wren, the king of all birds. St. Stephen's this day was caught in the fuzz. Next.
Wow. This actually goes on for quite a few more pages here. Perhaps we should stop at this point.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that what we read is pretty rich. It'll take a little digesting.
Isn't it just?
Mm.
What day is it?
Oh, if I can get books and pages, that would be good. Sylvia, you want
Bodley Head is 392.
Scabbard also.
okay, Gabra, okay.
427 Wordsworth.
Okay, great.
Penguin 456.
Penguin.
I think it's the short penguin.
Yes, 4, 5, 6.
Yep.
Okay, or do we have any other ones, or is that it?
I think Anne reads the long one. She's not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about what we read.
Yeah.
Is- I'll just say one of the first
Where
things.
are we at? Where are we at now, Joe?
We are. What do you mean? What's
Oh,
happening?
in you know, in the Odyssey. I'm just really crazy about this.
Well, in the Odyssey, we're about to enter the house of Circe. Zoe would be one of the handmaids of Circe. Circe has 4 handmaids,
Oh,
and you'd be very interested to see that. Well, we haven't met her yet, but the modern Circe has 3. And right at the very end, Stephen will ask, "What's happened to what's her name? I can't remember the name.
Oh, yeah. Georgina, is it Georgina?
Georgina, yeah, Georgina Johnson, isn't it? And of course, she would be the 4th maiden, but she's missing because she's got married. You know, Mr. Lamb from London has married her, which is a very unlikely event in a brothel, that a man comes along and wants to marry one of the ladies, but does happen, I presume. And he says, Lamb of London, who takes away the sins of the world. So, you know, you get that. But anyway, no, that's where we are. But all this is happening in a few seconds.
Yeah.
Bloom is hallucinating.
yeah.
Mhm.
So if you went back to in Wordsworth 406, where the 2 watch come by,
Mhm.
the 2 watch say nothing. They just walk past Bloom. But his guilt in his subconscious triggers this whole scene where he hands a business card and Henry Flower is written on it, with the wrong name, you know. And it goes for a trial. That goes on for 16 pages of pure subconscious thoughts, while these 2 night watchmen, who are not policemen, they're members of a charitable organization called the Dublin White Cross Association.
Huh.
They've no part of arrest.
Mhm.
They can't sort of charge you with anything. They just discourage customers from going to the ladies. You see, this is what they did. And but in his, you know, and he goes on trial, and Yelbert and Barry and all. I like to think that Yelbert and Barry, Miss Yelbert is one of the 44 ladies who replied to the advertisement for you know, that he's running it, that he's met Martha, as it were, or he's encountered Martha. But that's the key to it. And that in my page 422, where you see what happens is the dog turns into Dignam. And the dog gives evidence. He was at my funeral.
Oh.
And, you know, it has nothing to do with writing letters to women, you know, but the dog is, and it all recedes. Just those 2 words in the middle of a sentence. You see, I always read that, and I always pause there for a long pause, like I've fallen asleep, you know, and all recedes. The whole court scene, and Bloom now begins he presses forward through the mists. You're talking, I don't want to be talking Homeric correspondence, there's loads of them, but there's one there where Bloom plunges forward again, And he has a hesitation when he's talking to Zoe about going in. And Odysseus has a hesitation about going into the palace of Circe as well. He's not at all sure of himself. So you're getting these, again, this stuff going up, but you can go too much on it. But the key to it is that we're now in the second of the large hallucinations, because he's hallucinating with Zoe, and because Zoe's nice to him, he now has a positive hallucination where suddenly he's mayor of Dublin, and the streets are thronging to praise him, and But this is his inner. This is the piece of your mind that's below the surface that we cannot access. Subconscious mind, which we can't access except through sleep and dreams and hallucination, and a few other, slips of the tongue and all that sort of thing. So, kind of, does that answer your question, Hanny, in any way, Sylvia?
Oh, yeah.
It's very, very confusing, but very funny. I can never stop laughing.
I just think you've given me the key to understand. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, well.
Could I pick up Joe's point about hallucinations? When I was studying Ulysses a couple of years back in Mali at the Museum of Irish Literature, they told us that this chapter was divided up into fantasies, that there were 6 fantasies. I think that follows from what you said, Joe, about hallucinations.
They call fantasies now in Kennedy and those sort of books, but Joyce himself called them hallucinations. He said this is the hallucinatory episode.
And
so that's why I use that word.
Sure.
But,
and I mentioned Dan Mulhall before, who has written a guide to Ulysses. And I've just picked out a piece from here, if you'll bear with me. He said, we are evidently in the realms here of Bloom's and Joyce's sexual obsessions and fantasies. Bloom is branded as a fiendish libertine from his earliest years and is diagnosed by Buck Mulligan as bisexually abnormal and showing symptoms of chronic exhibitionism. The jury is made up of Dubliners we have already met, including the ubiquitous Simon Dedalus. So Bloom is evidently imagining himself being weighed up by his acquaintances and probably fearing the worst from them. There is a hell of a lot going on in Bloom's psyche, which Circe extravagantly draws to our attention.
That's a great description. But it takes a few readings to kind of to get to it, and but when you do, you love it. It's like I don't know if anyone else has tried to write about the unconscious mind.
I was wondering, had Bloom taken illegal substances when he went to nighttime?
Yeah, it's always possible.
What more than alcohol?
Absinthe. I thought they were taking absinthe, and that would make them hallucinate, because he would have used that in France. He would have drank it in France.
Yes, and if you drank enough of it, you'd certainly imagine you were in Montauk.
Yeah. Well, I don't think he does actually consume anything other than food in the text. You'd have to sort of, that you could interpret it that somehow he must have, and then it would stand up.
Or maybe James Joyce had consumed something rather than Bloom.
Well, that's what I mean.
At the time this was going on, there were rumors sweeping Europe about Joyce, that this book was coming out, and that Joyce was a cocaine addict, and that he was currently in New York dying, And at the other end of the spectrum, presumably based on the Volta cinema in Mary Street, that he was the undisclosed owner of a string of cinemas in Switzerland. There were all sorts of. So I find it hard to believe that these guys didn't try the odd substance in the times they were living in.
Well, laudanum was a substance of choice around that time,
Yeah.
on the
Well,
excuse
like-
that you might have a toothache.
And in the
Yeah, I think
pharmaceutical
you could buy cocaine, I think, in a
Yes, you could.
pharmacy.
Actually,
I'm
it was-
not familiar with these things myself.
No, could you? God, I thought it was a new. What? Were there
there was,
puppies?
there was actually an Italian wine with the Pope's picture on the front of it that was spiked with cocaine. And actually, if you look at the history of pharmaceutical companies, particularly in the late 19th century and the early 20th century, almost all of your major pharmaceutical companies, Bayer's, Merck, etc., built their original fortunes on straight up drugs, heroin and cocaine, etc. And they were freely available. They were not regulated. The regulations came later, towards the end of the 1920s or 1930s, I think. And there were huge numbers, particularly of housewives in the United States, who took laudanum on a regular basis. And even after these things were made illegal, there were always some women. Like I had a friend in Dallas, and he said that his grandmother was addicted to laudanum at the time when it was made illegal, and her doctor just kept prescribing her stuff for the 30 years because he didn't want to see her suffering.
Yeah, of course.
I think they called it Mother's Little Helper, was one of the slogans.
Yeah. You see, my generation thinks all this started in the 1960s, but in fact, our grandparents were totally familiar.
I think it continued to the present day. I don't know if anybody has watched the Netflix series called Painkillers with Matthew Broderick, and it's apparently about a pharma company that is basically peddling drugs under the sort of the pseudonym of them being painkillers. But people were not only getting hooked, people were dying as well.
You're probably referring to Purdue Pharma, which
I can't remember the name, Duncan, but I know Matthew Broderick was in the Painkiller series.
Okay, well, there was actually OxyContin.
OxyContin, that's the one. Yeah.
Oh, we have a fentanyl problem now in Ireland, which is the sister drug to OxyContin. But what I want to say, back to this for a second, absinthe is mentioned on page 386. I don't have the lines on this, but it goes, this is in Wordsworth 386. About halfway down, it goes, right Boniface, absinthe the lot. And then it says a line in Latin, nos omnes hibernimus viridium toxicum diabolus capiat posterior nostra. So I think it could be absinthe.
Okay, I will actually argue the point that Bloom is just, he's had so many experiences and he has been so wired thinking about Molly and Boyland. And, it started with the Calypso episode. It really became cranked up then. And then that led to the Gertie McDowell and the fantasies on the beach. And he was already tired, and he climaxed at that particular point. And then he ended up in Hollis Street Hospital, maternity hospital, where he was just completely befuddled by the behavior of the guys in the small room, acting like total barbarians. And he decided he wanted to rescue Stephen. who he saw as getting really drunk.
Hmm.
So he wanders into Night Town under a foggy, so he's tired, he's wound up.
Yeah.
There's a fog going on. He's feeling guilty, but on the other hand, there's all this stuff going on. But he also knows he has something of value. So when he gets a little bit of positive reinforcement from Zoe, in the entranceway to Bella Cohen's house, and Zoe takes his potato, he kind of has to go in,
Yeah.
even if he's hesitating, because she's got the talisman potato his mother gave him.
Yeah, yeah.
So I can see him hallucinating just out of tiredness and confusion and anxiety and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a man under immense pressure. And even, why does he go to Hollis Street? Like a casual inquiry about the pregnancy of a friend in the middle of the night. It's, and of course it's all to do with Rudy and the problem with Molly and himself and the loss of a child. Like he was already beginning to show that he was to behave like a man under pressure. That absent a lot is Stephen. Stephen is ordering a round of absinthe for all the people. This is in the last episode. And then he says, let us drink the green poison and the devil take the hindsight. So the green poison is the absinthe, but that's Stephen. That's
Okay.
that you see, not Bloom.
Mhm.
So it's in all that garbled stuff that, you just get by quickly. But to me, that explains what you said is the right explanation, Duncan. That's that, he's a man on the edge,
Yeah. Well, my kind of quick idea of why he went to Hollis Street was because he didn't want to go home.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want to take a chance in case Boylan was still there. And he didn't want to really see Molly until there had been enough separation there and she was winding down. And this random clue came from the universe about Mrs. Purefoy. And so he decided, I think that's why he went to the hospital, because it gave him something to do.
Yeah, but it's almost a semi-conscious action.
Mm-hmm.
Not something you thought out, and that's a real sign. Like that's the unconscious mind. That's like you go for a drive and you take a wrong road, that you'd be doing that drive for years, that kind of thing. So, but you can see it's only a novel, we can read.
Yeah, it is only a novel, but
Yeah.
we do, we get signals.
Yeah, it does stand up to
Happen that
it.
we interpret as signals, particularly
Yeah.
when we don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And we get either a signal or we get some
Yeah.
positive reinforcement of some kind. And we just follow it because we don't know what else to do.
Yeah, that kind of a thing. Yeah, half thought out. It's,
Half thought out, and okay, well, that sounds
Yeah.
as good as anything. I'll go check on Mrs.
yeah,
Pure.
I'm just taking my own experiences, so when you're confused by something, just how did I end up getting into that cinema? I didn't want to go in. You just
Well, if I could be a little bit grandiose, I think
Yeah.
that after the declaration of the death of God in the earliest 20th century,
Yeah.
and when not all but many people basically lost their religious compass, something had to replace it. And I think a certain amount of the replacement was just random signals where people would interpret things as, oh, well, maybe that's what I should do. So I found it really interesting And I've read this multiple times, but I never noticed before the changing breed of the dog.
Oh,
And
Yeah,
the,
yeah.
the dog it starts with Gary Owen,
Yeah.
goes through 5 or 6 different breeds of dog. Very
oh, I
rapid.
yeah, I noticed that as well.
Yeah, yeah.
It is National Animal Week here, after all.
I love that the man, the Rumbold, the guy who's going to execute him in the, he's
The barber.
Horace Rumbold, this British ambassador to Switzerland during the war when Joyce was there, and with all the troubles with the consulate.
Yeah.
He gets the job as master barber and executor.
I think that's pretty accurate, actually. The many diplomats during that particular time, their decisions literally could be the difference between living and dying.
That's a good point. Good point. Yeah.
We've got that guy that was a Japanese ambassador up in Latvia, I think, who actually rescued thousands of Jews trying to get out. And he just set up an assembly line and just kept on giving them visa after visa after visa to get them out.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a number of instances of that, but the one I remember most clearly was the Japanese diplomat. Mhm. Orla, what's on your mind?
I was just going to talk. Yeah, I'm very agitated this evening, but I was just going to mention on page 424, he seems to be very prescient about smoking tobacco,
Oh, yeah.
because it would have been seen as something social, and maybe women wouldn't have liked it. Women wouldn't have been seen smoking, but at that time,
Yeah.
and he's calling it poison.
Mhm.
And pestilence, a killer, a poisoner of the. I think that's smoking. I'm just asking because he's talking about swaggeroo cigars, tobacco.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah.
That's years before its time, isn't it? When you think of it.
Yeah. I thought, yeah, but there's been quite a few prophetic things in Joyce that I've noticed over the time.
There's a Me Too
Probably
there.
also picking up on, I believe it was King James, who was not happy about tobacco at all, and called it a devil weed, etc.
Oh,
But of course, it's a perfect product. And there were huge, even early, there were huge commercial interests that realized that if you can get people to smoke tobacco, you've got a customer for life.
Yeah.
Which foreshadowed the thing where the English government addicted the Chinese population to opium, because they needed a product that the Chinese would buy in order to maintain a international balance of trade. Yeah. Okay. Jane, Katrina?
Got nothing today.
Nothing
Just
today.
Dorothy.
I keep thinking that this is very filmic, because and Joyce did want this to be read out loud, but reading is so slow compared to what's going on. You really want to be seeing it.
Yeah. There's a very good film made, Stephen Ray's in it, called Bloom. And this part of it is done really well. And you get that cinematic.
Mm-hmm.
You see that it's written for the cinema, really. These are not sort of stay. I don't think it's a play within a book. It's a movie within a book.
Mm.
And those stage directions are really camera directions, and it
Mhm.
works really well. But because it's done as strict years ago in the 60s, did it well too. But it's in black and white. The modern one called Bloom, and you probably find it online. And it does all that. You really see it in color.
Oh, okay.
And it ruins you to be Irish there, because they shot it all in Dublin Castle, and you recognize Dublin Castle. But yeah, this particular part of it works because all the changes of dress that happen, Bloom just appears dressed one way, then different geared, and then cinema. So
Hmm.
well worth digging around if you might find it on YouTube or somewhere. Bloom.
Yeah, I'll look at that. I another thing in addition to the dog changing breeds.
Yeah.
The other thing, and this was a real simple one where is it Zoe? Zoe points out that both Bloom and Stephen are dressed in black. Which is
Yes.
obvious, but somehow
Yeah.
I forgot that, and then she kind of brings it back that they're both,
Yeah. Yeah. Even the girls mistake them for father and son, Do you know what's her name? Zoe Higgins.
Oh, right.
And Zoe is Greek word for life. So you have this maternal, life-giving kind of overtone to the meeting. And of course, the mother is very important in psychology, isn't it? Like at the end, we all marry our mothers or something, isn't that the kind of what they used to say back then anyway?
Was it? I was going to say, wasn't Bloom's mother Ellen Higgins?
Yes, Ellen Higgins. You see, it's his mother's name. It's his mother's maiden name, and it's Life Higgins. And sex, it's about sex in a brothel, and sex is the bringing of life into the world. So it's all. I can't quite express what I feel about it, but it's all very artistic.
On that movie, Joe, that you were referring to,
Yeah,
it's called Bloom 2003.
right. It's Stephen Ray in it. I think it is. He is, isn't he?
Stephen Ray, Angeline Ball from The Commitments, and Hugh O'Connor.
Yeah.
Produced by Jerry Murphy.
Yeah.
And directed by Sean Walsh.
It's a long time since I've seen it, but I remember enjoying it immensely. They came in, like you could criticize it on several fronts. They do the opening scene in the tower. They don't go to the real tower. They use the tower on the, what do you call the island of Dalkeith as a tower, but it works very, very well. It works well, you could sort of say, no, it's not accurate, but that the Circe episode in it is really the best one. And
okay, so Bloom's mother's maiden name was Higgins. What was her first name? Was it Eva?
Ellen.
Ellen.
Ellen. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking it was Eva, like Eve, so we have.
Yeah. Oh, that's very British. Adam and Eve. Yeah.
Well, and then if that were true, I mean, if he wanted us to think that Ellen, was close enough to Eve, and then we have Zoe.
Yeah.
So, we have the kind of the life and the death, or the casting out of the garden.
Yeah.
Garden.
Wonderful. And you could also find Belle Hélène in there in the Ellen. Belle Hélène being Helen of Sparta. You little bit of poetic license. You could see it for yourself. You can tell yourself if it's true.
There's also the thing where they really stressed, or the book really stresses the fact that Zoe, she has kohl, which is a Middle Eastern, a traditional Middle Eastern eye makeup. And then they mentioned about what she puts on her lips. I forget what she puts on her lips, but in both, her odalisque lips. And of
Yeah.
course, an odalisque, if you don't know, is actually a white Balkan woman who became part of a sultan's harem.
Yeah.
They were much prized, but they were, yeah. And I'll bring up my usual thing again. I think that Joyce had an unusual sensitivity to the plight of prostitutes.
Absolutely.
I think, unlike most people, he really thought about how they ended up being prostitutes, and it was usually through some unfortunate bit of history where it was one of the few ways that a woman could survive on their own after there had been a family downfall, or a number of different things. And I think that
I tell you, like, there's nothing in this episode that would tempt me to visit a brothel, whereas in literature, that tends to be all glamorized and, kind of, Joyce doesn't do it, or he doesn't glamorize it at all. And there's an undercurrent. Well, we haven't met them yet, so we're really talking about the girls, but there's a very there's an undercurrent of history running through the later parts of this that is very brutal.
Yeah.
So,
well, right in the very beginning, there are several references to Mercury, which of course was at that time one of the few supposed remedies. Of course, it was a remedy that killed and destroyed many people for syphilis. And then the scene where Zoe and Bloom are on the stairs, and Zoe feels his pocket, and she thinks that he has a canker.
Yeah.
And of course, the canker was also a big sign of venereal disease.
Indeed. Yeah.
And of course, women in the brothels were concerned about bringing any more venereal disease in.
Yeah.
And then the canker turns out to be his talisman.
Potato. Potato, of course, that's another Homeric reference there, Sylvia, that on his way to Circe, he encounters Hermes, this is Odysseus, who gives him a plant to consume so that Circe's magic will not work on him.
Oh, okay.
And curiously, that is called Molly.
Mhm.
If you look up a Homeric Greek dictionary, you'll just find Molly means the plant that Odysseus got from Hermes. It only occurs in this book throughout all of ancient literature, and that enables. I mean, everyone knows, sorry, that enables Odysseus to partake of encountering Circe, and her magic doesn't work. And this, if you like, the potato, it's this sort of, it's got black roots and a white flower. Or is it the other way around? Is it black flower and white roots? I kind of get mixed up on it. And of course, the flower is on the potato. And Mrs. Yelverton Barry, has discovered that the bloom in his dream or his subconscious has given her a potato. It's a rare plant. So the whole cure. And then Stephen has gone back to syphilis. Stephen has been accused twice, at least in the book, of having syphilis by Mulligan.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, there's a general paralysis of the insane. It doesn't sound
Right,
particularly
right,
nasty,
right.
you
Mhm.
know, at the start. And he's saying that someone else was saying it about you. So it's a very nasty twist of conversation.
Mhm, mhm.
That someone else is saying you've got the DD. So it's kind of running through it.
Yeah, and also back in the beginning of Cersei, as Bloom is coming into Nighttown,
Yeah.
there's a description of the person who has the staggering bob.
Staggering. Yeah.
Right.
I don't think they use the term staggering bob. They just talk about kind of the stiff-legged
Yeah.
jerk walk.
There's a guy who, yeah,
Mhm.
so they're all there.
Well, it's getting kind of late. I want to mention one thing. I'm not sure the relevance of it, but I do participate in a Dante Divine Comedy reading, and Ulysses is a character who comes up frequently, including even when they're in paradise. I think we're in Canto 27 or 28, and I had an epiphany, if you will, that Ulysses is the perfect model for modern people, because he's all knowledge and techniques. And he works on a horizontal plane. He's not interested. At least I cannot think of an instance where Ulysses, the Greek hero, is interested in anything spiritual at all. He's interested in going as far as he can and in moving as many circles as he can. And his thing is technique. It's tricks, knowledge of a practical sort. Whereas, of course, the hero in Dante is Dante, and Dante, as he gets into the Paradiso area, he's beginning, you know, he's going up. And he's not so much interested in techniques at all. He's interested in kind of spiritual connection, etc. So anyway, I don't know why I think that's important, and I may be totally wrong about it, but that's where I'm going to be putting some of my thinking for a while. Is, you know, did Ulysses have a spiritual life, or was he just interested in making a living and keeping his own and having adventures?
He had relationships to gods and goddesses, but they were almost like humans to him. It was not as, I don't see it as a spiritual relationship to them. Would you agree with?
Joe probably knows it a lot better than I do, but I think it's
like Odysseus is famous for his sacrilege, which is very like what you're describing, Duncan. You know, and Bloom has hints of sacrilegiousness about him. You know, he's just written that way. The big sacrilege of Odysseus is presenting the wooden horse to Troy. The horse is the symbol of Poseidon, and Troy was the city of Poseidon. And it's like using a crucifix, or a large crucifix with a pile of soldiers in it to get into some city, you know, and that's why he's hunted by Poseidon. So, like, if anything, he's sacrilegious, and like the Sirens was very sacrilegious, because he's using, as you say, technology or a technique, you know, to press beyond the span of man, beyond what man should do, and, you know, beyond man's design, to experience this but not die. And that's sort of sacrilegious too, because you're not accepting your role in the universe.
Yeah.
So he's far from being religious. He's probably negative religious.
Yeah, I think it's largely technique and all that sort of stuff. But I think
Yeah, it is.
this is going beyond the immediate reading that we're doing. But in Bloom's case, I think I think a case could be made that Bloom is forgive me, a new and improved Ulysses.
Yeah.
Because he does have real concern for people.
Mhm.
To use the Buddhist term, he does have compassion,
Mm.
and he does want to make people feel better, to help people along. And that's a little I mean, it's my not so deep reading of the actual Ulysses or Odysseus is that he used people more on a practical thing. I can't think of any instance where he showed the compassion, meaning to help someone even if it was to his detriment.
Yeah. Well, like the Odyssey is part of. It's a war poem,
Yeah.
Follow up to the war poem of the Iliad, and it contains vast quantities. The Iliad contains vast quantities of bloodshed.
Mhm.
And lots of descriptions of chariots driving over bodies and arrows going in one side of the neck and coming out the other, and this sort of, like they're bloodthirsty Bronze Age war tales sung by bards to praise their rulers, and and so they're triumphant marches and all this sort of stuff in there, and it like it's very old, and the modern man is quite different, like with the things the modern man would be interested. So it makes great sense that in the retelling, and that's what Joyce said, that he was writing a modern day Odysseus, that he would have a lot more compassion in him.
He wouldn't have Bloom slay Boylan and drag his entrails through the streets of Dublin.
Yeah. And of course, people think that the Odyssey ends with the happy couple reunited, go to bed, but that's not the end of the Odyssey. There's another book after that where the serious business is done of making amends to the suitors' families. So,
really, what this book still exists? I mean, are there?
Oh yeah, the last book of the Odyssey. When I say book, a book is a chapter, modern parlance.
Okay.
And but it doesn't end. What our old Latin and Greek teacher used to call pandering to the whimsical fancies of the 20th century. There's sort of romantic love stories end with happily ever after. So he says you don't find that in ancient literature. I'm repeating what you were saying, Duncan.
Okay. So you're saying that the standard Odyssey that we can go and buy in the store, it goes beyond.
Yeah, there's the final book. Yeah, the final chapter of it. You'll find it.
Okay.
You'll find the important business being done, and arrangements being made to compensate the families of all the suitors who've, they're part of the kingdom. They have to be dealt with. So.
Or suffer another war.
Well, yes, this grudge will come. Their children will come looking for revenge, if it isn't resolved. So, but that would be the way the Bronze Age thought. We don't think like that now. So,
well, we try not to think like that.
Yeah. Some of us try not to.
Well, gee, this is too much fun.
Too
Yes.
much fun. Better go get
And-
me back. See if she'll come back home.
Okay, okay, well, I think it's time for us to say goodbye. And look
Thank you.
forward to next time.
Thank you,
Thank-
everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Yeah.